Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beyond Life Paranormal Research Podcast. I'm your host, Russell Reynolds, and we got a great show tonight. We got a good special guest. My guest tonight is a demonologist. He works with Father Bob Bailey, who has been a guest on my show as well. Um, he works very close with Father Bob, and he's here tonight to share some of his demonology knowledge with us and what he does in the field. Without further ado, let's bring him on, James Anito.
Hey
Hey,
Russell,
James,
how you
welcome to
doing?
the show.
Thank you
I'm
very
good.
much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So, tell my audience a little bit about yourselves, ones that aren't familiar with you in the field and what you do.
Yeah, my name is James Anito. I am mostly known as a demonologist in the field of the paranormal and ministry work, but I am co-founder of a lecture unit and as well a healing liberation unit called Faith and Reason, which is co-founded with Father Bob Bailey, who's a Roman Catholic priest who's been on your show before. And I'm also a parapsychological investigator for a nonprofit parapsychology group out of Canada and New England called PPRI. I have a BA in psychology working on my master's. I have an illustrious ministry background and as well have um, a construction background where my career for the past over 10 years has been in mechanical field, which is of course HVAC and plumbing and some electrical. So I like to say well-rounded individual. I'm very into theory, and I'm also very into faith and anything that kind of goes full circle around culture. I like to say one day I'll be a citizen of the world, which is understanding all cultures and integrating into it and understanding it, which kind of where I live, my definition of demonology than the far fetched of just study of demons. But my definition of demonology is a study of the lore and cultural traditions of wicked spirits. So, I take a lot of my objective and social science and scientific background and then apply it into the paranormal. And yeah, I've been doing this for 20 years, early 15 years old. And, that's not just throwing a dart in the dark and saying I did and been around for 20 years. I've been publicly well known to be around for that long. Worked with people like Carl Johnson and Keith Johnson in my youth. I've been around the wagon for a long time and, you know, still continuing to do it. And like I said, now working with Father Bob, which has been a blessing for both of us in ways where our lives were going. So that's where I am today. I hate talking about myself. But that's a little bit about me for your viewers.
Awesome. What made you get into like the demonology aspect of the paranormal field?
Well, I always had an interest since a young age in theodicy, which is good versus evil, which is a philosophical thought point by Epicurus. And so I always liked Greek philosophy growing up. You have some of the greats that created the foundations of how we look at in Western civilization today of medicine, science, physics, mathematics. So I always had a deep fascination with Greek philosophy and philosophy in general. But in my youth, I never had a paranormal experience. I'm not that same kind of bandwagon story, and I'm not saying that in a disregard towards other people, but I haven't had that same story where I
Mhm.
grew up in a haunted house or have some sort of clair mediumship or psychic ability and was experiencing things. No, I was thrust into childhood trauma. I was adopted, raised by a Lutheran family, which wasn't a great family, so to say. They did raise me, and I am appreciative of that, but I wasn't treated the greatest. And going to church every Sunday and being part of Bible study, you hear a lot of how God is good and all this.
Yes.
So at a very young age, I started to kind of like understand, well, if God is so good, why was this done to me? Early
Right.
excusehood of towards what happened to me. And so as soon as I could be cognitively understood, um, understanding and literate to read books, I started going to the library, picking up things of civilization, culture, theology, God, and dissecting what God is. And at a young age, I don't like to say I was agnostic or atheist, but I like to say I was Darwinistic or Darwinist. So I was really into evolutionary biology. And when I was a kid, Charles Darwin was not a hero, but an icon in my life that made me keep researching based on natural selection and a lot of other things that came from biological viewpoints in our time frame and civilization. But eventually, these questions kind of elongated into ghosts, spirits, angels, demons, gods and goddesses, Christian God, Zoroastrianism, and so I started heavily studying that, and then also was big into ufology and stuff like that. So what is beyond, extraterrestrial to
Mm.
our planet, and how did they get there? So a lot of that really kind of catapulted me into getting involved in paranormal investigation when I became of a certain age, which was 15 years old, here in local Rhode Island, going around with my buddies and investigating graveyards. But really, what the catalyst of that was too is not just the literature, but it was also the explosion of paranormal shows as well. Before Ghost Hunters came out, which was in Rhode Island, and really was kind of the big reasoning of why I started doing it physically myself. But you also had Scariest Places on Earth. You had Most Haunted, which came out right before Ghost
Yep.
Hunters. But then you also, as well, and the people laugh when I say it, but I was so enamored into it as a child. But Scooby Doo kind of had that inkling of how do you debunk and how do you throw out something of the supernatural, the preternatural, and where it's explainable, and usually they always did. So you had a lot of these, and of course I can't say these two without as well, but In Search of by Leonard Nimoy, and then as well you had Unsolved Mysteries. So a lot of these television shows and this, of course, literature maybe want to do it. So investigating as a kid, I had to throw a lot of my experiences out because, for one, your brain doesn't fully grow until your mid 20s. And
Yeah.
then as well, you're very, even though you try to approach objectively as a youth, as adolescent, you're still very subjective. So, I had a lot of experiences and did a lot of investigations. I went in the military, and in the military, I was still not religious, but I had an epiphany, a moment in my service where in one day I had a complete 180 of being not religious to being super religious, reading the Bible every day, praying, thanking God for the enlightenment that I received in that moment. And so when I got out of the military, out of training, I then became part of a group that I founded called Ghost Hunters of Supernatural Truth, and we hit our first residential case eventually. And there was something that kind of woken me. Like there was kind of something that made me lead towards working with Carl Johnson of Beyond the Veil Paranormal. He was with Dina Palazzini at that point, but was what happens if I come across a case that collecting data and saying, "Yeah, you're not crazy. It's haunted." Where and that's not good enough for them. Where do I go from there? How do I approach that other avenue? And I was involved in ministry work at that time with the local Church of Christ. So I then said, well, I'm going to integrate my ministry work and I'm going to integrate my investigation work together and meld those two. So Andre Courier, who was my co-founder, was on an episode of Demon Attack, which was on the Haunted, which was one of the most prolific episodes. And they had called in Rips, which was the team at that time. Andre and Shane Johnson called in Carl Johnson, and I knew Carl and Keith due to Ghost Hunters, but also, of course, I in some ways followed their work because I knew their involvement with the Warrens, and I also knew that they were pretty predominant in the demonology field. So I actually had met Keith quite a few times at Walmart, local to me, because he lives not too far from me, and I was the department manager for electronics, and so he would come in, and one time he was in the recorder section, and he was saying, what's the best recorder I could use? And Keith's famously known for using analog tape still to
Yeah,
this day.
yeah.
So I said, well, this is the best recorder you can use, which at that point was a Sony. And so we hit it off because I said, I know who you are. And he's like, he kind of was taken back because not he probably didn't get that from too many people, even in a locale. So
Mm.
I knew Keith before I met Carl, and before Andre introduced me to Carl. But I had started talking to Carl once Andre introduced us, and we hit it off. And I have a tech background, in high school. Um, I went to Votech for Cisco networking, and before I went into the military, my associate's program was in computer programming. So I have a tech background as well when I was a youth, and so he's like, "Well, we need a tech manager, and we need somebody to create a website. We need all this." And I'm like, "Well, I can do all that. I know how to dissect DVRs and all that." So he reached kind of gave me the invitation to join their group as their tech manager, and I did so. And basically, not to continue on for the next hour about the how I got into demonology, but really that was kind of the launching point of me getting involved in the demonology, because then I was working with the demonologist, was working with him by his right side, and was able to ask him a lot of questions, and that was the birth of being into demonology, to be honest with you, in a physical application. Like I
Mm.
said, always interested in the academic aspect of it, but that was the launch of being, and I like to call it. Um, I like to say demonology is the study, as I said at the intro, but I like to say what we do in a physical interpretation is apply demonology. You're applying that study and then looking at it through the lens of in a physical circumstance. So, but yeah, that was the origin point of my involvement.
Uh, Katie Stafford wanted to know, did theology help you understand those things in the spirit realm?
Yeah, of course. Well, the thing is like I go to a lot of paranormal conventions, and then at one point I was ordained. Most people that follow me know that. Um, so I used to wear clerics, and when I used to wear my clericals, I people come up to me and say, "What are you doing here?" And then I looked at them. "What are you doing here? You're a Catholic too." And um, it was always a joke. I'm like, well, there's many interpretations of spirit in of course scripture, and early Christianity. Zoroastrianism, which is precursor to the Abrahamic religions. was very rooted in spiritualism, um, with one God, of course. So, a lot of our foundation and our structure below that, our pylons, come from the idea of the spiritual realm. And, it's never not discussed. There's, of course, a few accounts in Christian scripture, many different accounts, and of course, different other cultural belief systems. And we have nomenclature to say, since as long as we know humans have interpreted their lore and myth in writing, which is about a little over 10,000 years, to the Sumerians and Mesopotamians. But we know, as far as that long, we know that there was some form of spiritual belief, idea of spirits or demons. Lamashtu was one of the first demons identified in human culture, and she was the um, uh, the rival to Pazuzu, which is actually most famously known now because of the Exorcist. But so yeah, so as long as we've known of lore and myth being written in human culture, we know there has been some form of spiritual realm to it. So theology has been very keen in that, because a lot of people think theological study is just Christian oriented, but in reality, another interpretation of theology is also the study of religion. So, religion is very, very massive. I believe there's over 4,500 different belief systems out there. So, there's a lot to study within the realms of religion, and then of course even within Christianity, because of all the different denominations we have in our own uh,
Mhm.
foundation. So it's been very helpful. Of course, I don't put all my eggs one basket. Like I said, I'm very objective, but I do have a strong faith, and faith is always going to be first and foremost. God's always going to be first and foremost in my life. But I also am very inquisitive mind, so I don't doubt God, I don't question God, but I definitely question specific things that we might have interpreted back then to what we now interpret it as now. But that is a whole nother ball of wax. But no, theology has been a great basis of understanding the spirit realm. But I also have added more different forms of application and study as well. Like I said, I'm part of a parapsychology group, and that's a whole nother avenue as well. So there's a conglomerate of things that have been a necessity in my life and in my study, that have added to my understanding of the spirit realm, which is of course minimalistic, because if it wasn't the paranormal or or the supernatural, or what is beyond normal, um, you know, it would be normal, right? So there's a reason that it's called paranormal. It's because it's unknown. There's a value of mystique to it, and that's even the same thing with like abnormal psychology. We don't know why some of these people have the thoughts or the patterns they do still to this day. We've come up with disorders, but even abnormal psychology, there's still unknown values to why people do things psychologically, uh, they do to people or themselves. So there's abnormality to it, and there's the unknown to it. So if there was an unknown to it, it'd be very all knowing. We would know what's life after death. Of course, us Christians say we like to go to heaven, or we're in purgatory, or we're in hell. Yeah, I definitely believe in that, but it's also one day we might be proven wrong and nothing happens, or we're just in the ground. And I'm not doubting me going to heaven. I'm just saying, in an open mindset, you have to be analytical in
Right.
how you approach it, because if you're always set in your morals and your foundations, then you never grow as a person. I would have never grown to be the Christian that I am today, if I didn't keep questioning and I didn't have that experience. If I never had that experience in the military, maybe I likely would have never been Christian. We might not be having this conversation today. So, theology has been a strong a brunt of why I'm involved. And, I believe God put me on this path. For what reason, I do not know, but I believe I was put on this path by by God, and I'm in it for the ride now.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the parapsychology for people that aren't familiar with parapsychology and what it is.
Yeah, so parapsychology is basically the study of life after death, right? Or what the mind is capable of. So we know in bylaws of psychology, it's a social science. It's the study of the mind. It's the study of mental health. But parapsychology is the study of what the human mind can do. So, can we bend spoons? That's a parapsychology thing. That would be called telekinesis or psychokinesis. And can mediums actually talk to the dead, or can they actually see the dead? Can clairvoyance talk to the dead? Can clairsentience hear? Clairaudience, can they hear? Can clairsentience feel the senses? Can empaths actually really feel emotions? And do people generate uh, spirits, or what I would like to say, ghost? Most famous one, poltergeist, which is noisy ghost, which is a German word, but poltergeist. But So parapsychology is in the realm. Uh, it was a foundation created by um, Mr. Ryan and no, not Ryan. Sorry, what's it? Yeah, JP Ryan, JB. But it was something that he had was interested in, and kind of created that foundation of uh, the afterlife and how it's possible and studying it. And so, parapsychology looks at it through the lens, of course, social science, and how you interpret it on the level. Is it from the human mind? Is it through a subconsciousness that still uh, kind of integrates to our earthly realm, and they are able to move objects, able to still give off voice patterns through the ethos of sound waves. So parapsychology is very interesting. I have a love-hate relationship with it, because you know, um, you know, with any social science, there's a lot of misunderstanding to it. So a lot of social science not empirical at all. It's not like the actual natural sciences, but parapsychology is still a fascinating thing to look at, because I do truly think throughout my caseload, not how I look at it differently now by going back to case files and remembering specific things. I do believe in a term coined by the metaphysical realm long time ago, called artificial intelligence. And
Mhm.
artificial intelligence now is most famously known in the computer science industry, and we use it every day now. It's on Facebook. It's everywhere. But the metaphysical realm of it was that we would create these beings through our own projections, through our own rituals, and they weren't once living. They weren't once created by anything else. They are, of essence, our emotion, our thought, a congregation of people um, putting this method together. And there's many terms of this in many cultures. We have egregores, poltergeist, we have telpas. That is also a parapsychological thought pattern too, that people can project and create things. And a funny thing is, um, with adolescent woman, right, where poltergeist were pointed at for a long time. Adolescent women were pointed at to be the kind of the catalyst to this sort of being. And I like to say that, well, think about an adolescent woman or adolescent girl is going through womanhood, through puberty, and there's a likeliness of emotional tantrums,
Yeah.
um, because they're confused of what's going on with their body. So I also like to say that if that is happening, what is the chances of a psychic tantrum, like and them as well projecting that emotion and
Right.
that force out and things happening. And actually, one of the cases that I believe that to be a reality more so, and I think there's other reasons as well, but maybe not a popular opinion, but it's my opinion, and I stand by it because I've researched the case quite a bit and been to the house quite a bit. Is the Conjuring house, right? You got to remember, there's five adolescent women or females in a house with a mom that had a father with a husband that was gone all the time and work. So you have this old house. You have these five girls going through puberty and in their adolescence, and you have a you have the property which is old as well. So you have a kind of a combination of things being echoed through these girls' projections as well. So it's quite understandable to look at it and say it's quite possible. I'm not trying to sell you on it. I'm trying to give you ability to think, is that possible? Because that's the great thing about theory. It's theory. It's not fact. It makes you want to think about it. It makes you want to interpret it and dig into it. So think of it as an avenue of, is that quite possible? Is my in my cases that I've done, is that something that actually could have happened? Was it a projection? Was it a psychic tantrum? And in a lot of my cases, and this is through my own lens and through my own eyes and through my own experience, is I believe a lot of those cases were that, to be honest with you, because they wanted it, or they were lonely, or they had mental health issues. And, eventually this need and want, this loneliness, then became something that was announced to them and announced to us as humans. And we, of course, would then jump to that it's spirit, or it's Aunt May, lost Aunt May, or somebody that is a purgatorial spirit lost here. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's what they created. And there's actually a very famous experiment that was done on what I'm talking about. It was called the Philip experiment. And of course, a lot of people will poop on it, but there was also a lot of great information on that if you really dig into it yourself. But the Philip experiment, they created their own individual, and created the history of this person, and whatever they created talked to them, and they have this on recordings, on video. And if you do your research, you'll find the real audio and real video, and yeah, of course, they're write-ups on it because it was done by university folk. So with any time you have university folk doing a study like that or experiment, they're going to be writing scholarly articles on it and papers on it. So you can do your own research on it, but hey, it's quite fascinating.
Right. Katie was saying she's been studying star seeds and light workers. I I am of the light of Jesus, but could it be a spiritual awakening of some of these individuals?
I've been starting to late work because I'm the light of Jesus, but could it be a spiritual awakening for some of these Yeah, like I think, and my opinion, and judge me if I'm wrong, but sometimes I've been known to be outspoken and spit me in the butt. But I think the word star seed has, I know, like hundreds of people that call themselves star seeds, and maybe that is the case, but also maybe I also think it's uh the new the new fad. Um but maybe it's not. And as far as light workers and stuff like that within that realm, I think that it's all quite possible. I think that if you really believe that you are from another planet, or from another universe, and you are a planetary seed here, um, from from the celestial realms, or the out of the earthly realm, which is of course planet Earth, but and you were plopped here. A lot of that can also intertwine into ancient alien theory. But once again, it's theory. But it's quite fascinating. Some people have, there's two sisters up in New Hampshire. I can't think the names off the top, but I really truly believe in them because they've never changed their tune. They've been saying that they were this for a very long time, and and I respect where they come from. But as far as light workers, yeah, I would consider myself a light worker as well. Like I said, I believe that God enlightened me for a reason. And I did this path for a reason. I had their Neller enlightenment a little over a year ago. Actually, a little over 2 years ago now. I'm sorry, but where I was going through a dark time, and I do believe God talked to me for the first time in my life, and told me to get my not like this, but I'm changing it a little bit, but basically told me, and this is how I took it and why I changed my life, but basically told me to get my head out of my butt and keep up, keep on the right path, and realize what's right and what's wrong in your life. And so I believe I'm a light worker too, because my mission as a demonologist in ministry work is to spread light and peace. So
Mm.
it's to take away the darkness within the confines of these people's minds, or within their homes. And so as well, believe I perform light work. So, but there's also many different interpretations of what people believe light work to be, through different forms of occultism or different cultures as well. But in my Christian roots, I would say I'm a light worker. I might not necessarily come out and say I'm a light worker, but in the same nuance of definition that I am a light worker, and I have an ability. I'm not a psychic or medium. I like to say I'm an extra large, but I have the gift of discernment. So, and I think a lot of people that do demonology or spiritual warfare have that gift as well, to discern spirits and know it's good or bad, and to know if people are lying or not, and have that ability to understand the situation. So it's all interesting stuff. I wouldn't say star seeds is my forte. It's not my where my most knowledge is, but it's all quite possible. A lot of these names, uh, names and things come from uh, a point in history, right? And I always like to say that every myth and folklore comes from a true circumstance that just gets spin out of reality because of it being passed down so many times. But every myth and folklore probably did have a starting point where there was actual truth to it, and then it just became more barbaric, or more enlightened than it was truly. But we've seen this as well in natural science. The giant squid, that was once interpreted as the kraken. um, Giant apes that were found in Japan, the mountain apes, were once cryptid creatures, and found over 100 years ago. um, so you know a lot of things that people talk about, there's probably a truth to it, but how where the truth lies is, for your interpretation, as well, at the end of the day.
Right. And I know even with us for like residential cases, we run into a lot of mental health issues and stuff like that with people.
Hmm.
Your teenage girls manifesting poltergeists because of the changes in their bodies, like you said with parapsychology.
Hmm.
So there are some telltale signs to look for when you're doing like residential cases to help people.
Yep. No, it really is. That's why I say working with people. To me, I think every paranormal team wants to go out and be the hero, the fly by night. But when you're dealing with people, like, being a ghost hunter is fine. Going and paying for a location, or investigating a business, you know, it's cool, right? That's awesome. You can do that, get your experiences, or if you have questions of the unknown, and need proof to yourself or disproof to yourself, then go do it. But when you start getting in residential cases, Now you're not only putting yourself in danger, your team in danger, but you're also putting the people that live there in danger. You can say a wrong thing that could affect them greater than you think. You could say wrong word, one wrong thing, and their life is in turmoil. You get to go home, sleep in your own bed, and they're up all night, scared out of their minds because you told them that it is this based off of one EVP, or even based off of your own subjectivity. Dealing with homes, it is not meant for everybody. And I feel too many people rush into it because they feel like they're doing a good service to people, but sometimes when you feel like you're doing good, you're actually doing the worst for them. Um, it's like a good analogy is like, you want to help somebody with their medical condition, because yeah, at the end of the day, you want them to be in good health, right? But you're not a doctor, so don't give them medical advice. Not because
Exactly.
you dealt with something similar or you read it on WebMD, and then you're like, "Oh, I had that too." But what happens if they had completely something different with the same side effects? So like, but we got to remember, dealing with residential cases, you have to be very careful, and a lot of people aren't. And trust me, I talk about this on my own mistakes. I haven't been perfect or impervious to doing wrongdoings or making mistakes in cases. I have, and this is how I learn from. Okay, well, shit. Uh, I did this. I can only imagine the hundreds of other teams that are doing this, but that continue doing this and
Mhm.
then don't change it because they don't have a kind of an epiphany and say, well, why did I do that? That was wrong of me to do that. But then they continue doing it because not everybody understands their mistakes. That is human culture. A lot of us live in the life of insanity where we can keep making the same mistake over and over again, expecting a different result. I bet you could go out in the world right now, your friends, and look to them to the left or the right, and be like, "Yeah, it's true. My friends make the same mistake all the time. They make the same bad relationship mistakes all the time. They make the same business decisions all the time. They make the same work mistakes all the time, and they don't learn from it." We know a bunch of people like that. So,
Right.
but when you're dealing with people in their home, and when it comes to the unknown values of what we do, and you're saying things, that's a scary thing. Like, can you imagine saying, I need electrical service in my house? Let me call Joe down the road. He wired his house, right?
Yep.
But he's not an electrician. He's not a licensed electrician. Let me call Joe. Come wire my house, Joe. you know and your house burns down, right? it,
Exactly.
all I know is I'm gonna reach out to the electricians that's licensed, that has liability, that has insurance. So if my house burns down because they make a mistake, everybody makes mistakes, that I know I'm covered. Shit, I lost my house, but their insurance is gonna pay me. Joe comes in, you know, then you can have a litigation battle where Joe's insurance might pay you, but they're also, at the end of the day, the court's gonna probably say, well, you could have hired an electrician. You had Joe do it. What was his credentials? Technically, you also, in most states, need to pull a permit to do a major work on your house. So why didn't you do that? Now then you're at fault, right? So I know it's a different area of viewpoint of the circumstance, but in reality, you have to look at these avenues as well when you're dealing with people. Like, what can I say and what can I do that could not only put me in a bad spot, but them. And there's too many teams that are just going to people's houses thinking they're doing good, and then unfortunately they're not.
Yep. I mean, we've gotten called into several where they've had teams out there and they stir it all up and then they leave and then the client's not at ease and they're still scared and freaking out. So they call us to come in
Yeah,
to straighten it out. Or
yeah,
they tell a client this, and this is going on when you shouldn't be because they're already scared enough. You should keep that to yourself until
yeah.
you back up what is going on.
And most of the time, Russell, I never. I'm a cause and effect person, right? Um, I, not all the time, and actually most of the time, not ever able to necessarily come up with a cause and effect. You can come up with a synopsis or a hypothesis of why this is happening, right? From this, from that. Demonic cases, I've come through my own research and my own understanding is people that deal with demonic oppression, obsession, maybe some sort of vexation, or even infestation, and they're targeted within that infestation. There's I've always noticed a level of trauma in their life that was the root cause of why they were targeted or why they were affected. So, what is that root cause? And so but so many people don't look for that. They have one moment. I always like to laugh at people that go into houses or in locations and they get a demon name. Oh, I'm Beelzebub or I'm Belial or I'm this. And I'm like, well, first thing, if you knew about demonology or even spiritual warfare, a demon's not going to give their names willy nilly. But you know what is going to give their name a name out as a fear tactic? An intelligent spirit. And I think we lose a disregard for the idea of what the word intelligent when we're investigating because these spirits, even though they're not physical, right? If we look at it in let's speak in a theoretical sense, if these spirits are not physical, they were once corporeal, but then not now they're subconscious or ball of energy, whatever they are. Once they leave the confines of our body, they don't lose their intelligence because guess what? They were once intelligent, had intelligent consciousness, and even though their physical body's not there, they don't lose that. We still gain our free will. Then that's why you can say purgatorial spirits aren't in heaven because maybe they don't want to go to heaven yet, and because they have a message to get across, or maybe they're lost because for one, something happened to them and they want to get that resolution before they move on. But so many people don't look at these things and they get these little snappy remarks through EVPs or something happens or they get scratched and then they jump for the worst. It's the demon. Well, do you know there's a difference between a scratch from a spirit and a scratch from a demon? No, most people don't know that. They look totally different. For
Yep.
one, one looks like three razors cut you, and the other one has like scratches of what you would scratch yourself like. So a lot of people don't look at these things and they jump to the D word or they jump to it's an evil spirit. I have a very prolific case that this happened where this gentleman had a duplex house, so a bottom and first floor, and it was two separate, kitchen in the bottom and kitchen up top. So it was basically split in one house, and it was his grandmother's house and he lived in the basement and then she died, so he took over the whole house and decided to move upstairs because he upstairs was nicer. And so he started experiencing things, and he did get a team involved, and that's how I got involved. But he was scared, and his method of fear, he started lashing out negatively, and he started swearing. He said, "Get the hell out of my house, you don't effing belong here." All the colorful things that you can say when you're mad or fearful, and you regress to bad morals. So you know I have my hit or misses on mediums. I think there are people that do have this great ability, but I also think there's a lot of people that harp on it because it's a money maker,
Mhm.
and they're good at reading people and being good at being theatrical. But on that case, when I got involved, I did work with a few mediums on that, but I also did assess it myself, and every medium that I brought on did not know each other, and they all said that, well, it was the grandmother and she was mad that he was speaking these profane things to her, and she loved that house so much and she had many memories there. Her husband and her lived there for a period of time. I even think they built the house, if I remember correctly. So there was so much history involved. There was that anchor for her to want to leave a portion of her there, or herself there, or just want to be there. That was her heaven for her. And um, so when we had multiple mediums say the exact same thing, little detail different, but I also kind of looked at it and said, I don't feel nothing here. Like, nothing is being, nothing's coming through religious provocate when I do religious provocation or saying scriptural scriptures. Nothing's coming from this. Nothing aggressive. But you know, but I listened to the mediums, and on this one case, and I said to him, I was like, well, let's look at it through this. If this is your grandmother, right? And most of the times I want her to say it's this or that. But I said, okay, let's think this is your grandmother. And you're saying this. If you said, and I used the analogy, I said, if she was still alive today and you told her to F off and go to hell and all this, what would she do to you? And he basically said she'd beat the crap out of me with a broom. And I said, well, there you go. I said, well, stop this, stop feeding into it, live
Mhm.
your life normally. And if something happens, disregard it. Don't go into a spasm of words that are naughty, and see where that goes. And but to be known, nothing ever bothered him after that. Like for a great period of time, he had little things happen here or there, but once he stopped paying mind to it and stopped reverberating his fears into the ethos of his home, nothing to the level of what it was happening at from that point on. So was it his grandmother? Who knows? But at the end of the day, is that he stopped feeding into it, stopped being aggressive with it, and it stopped. But if it was another Joe Schmo, and they're hearing all this and this is happening, they're gonna come in there blasting, saging, doing uh, blessings of the house and trying to force things out. And there's going to be an exorcism in the house magically from somebody that believes they're an exorcist, and it's just going to elongate the situation for this
Right.
person. Right, he's going to go through much more turmoil, and I'm assuming if you're going to force, and now if, we speak in the sense of if it is the grandmother and you're trying to force the grandmother out of the house, I'm assuming that's gonna piss her off even more because, like, why are you throwing me out of my house, right? So but these are the kind of things you have to look at and assess before you start throwing javelins uh, to things that you don't know what's going on. But too many people throw the D word around, and too many people don't have the knowledge to just sit down and listen and be open minded to
Right.
what could be occurring in the homestead or in a person's life.
April Mueller had a question. She says, I study ancient tech, but I always focused on prophecy and end times, but the paranormal is all over ancient texts. Don't demonologists study the similar texts?
So I'm not a prophecy and end times person. That's more Father Bob. I know he has like a bunker already built for the end times. And I'm not joking. Like he's well prepared. He knows a mystic that gave him some things, and I'm not at liberty to say what was discussed with him about that. That's secret between him and I, and more than if he's more than willing to speak to people about it, that's up to him. But I'm very informed of the possible end times. I am very well versed that uh, the Antichrist walks this earth at this point in time, and likely is from the Middle East. That is something that is outside of what Father Bob and I. Most people are very well aware of that prophecy, and I do believe that to be true. I do believe that the Antichrist does walk the earth right now, and That is not my forte. If the end of the earth or end of the times as we know it does happen, I do know that likely I am to be one of God's warriors as a physical warrior because of what I do, and likely the people that do this line of work are probably meant to be a part of that debacle, but maybe possibly. But that's not my forte. But I definitely believe um, enough of it. I've studied quite a few of the prophecies and sacred texts, and of course, Revelations is very big on that in Scripture about end times or beginning times, of depending on how you look at it, of a sway in how we know uh, as we do now. But yeah, it's a very interesting thing. I think throughout time, through human civilization, and through, of course, biblical scripture, including the Old Testament, where in the book of Moses, the Torah, through the Jewish lens, is that God was very, mm, uh, very damning on humans, and think of why, right? And think of what we were doing. Think of that we were interbreeding. We were doing all these things that we were basically told not to do. And we were speaking in tongues. We were praising other gods and goddesses outside of God. And so, and we were doing a lot of other things where God then condemned us, destroyed cities, created mass floods, and did all these other things. It's because, he's not a evil God, but he also is, as a father would make sure that his children know that you can't do this, and there's a price to pay. And maybe it's more than a price to pay than I would do to my kids if they didn't listen and they did something. But at the end of the day, I can also look through God's lens. I am not God and never will be, and never claim to be, and definitely don't know what goes through God's consciousness or omnipotent mind. But or thought. So, but you think about it in this sense that if you look at it through demonology, and since the fall, a third of the heavenly host falling due to um, Lucifer and the other third of the fallen that didn't like us as humans, and didn't like that we were made in God's image, and all the other things that we can talk about. But you can look at through human history of the adaptation of demonology. Yes, during the Inquisition, a lot of innocent people were killed due to superstition, also due to politics based on superstition, that utilized as superstition for political gain. So there has been many times on this planet where the use of demonology was used for bad. King James, as much as I love demonology and King James version of the Bible, he was a tyrant. So wasn't Charlemagne, but at the end of the day, is we do know that there has been ups and downs through periods of uh, uh, evil in of course humanity, and good in humanity, where there has been great moments of peace in humanity, and there have been great deviations from peace and great chaos and turmoil. And so I think these up and downs are a battle of that good versus evil, and where we get to a point where evil is um, the plane of humanity, and more evil deeds are happening through evil ethics and morals, then we will get to the point where the end time will happen, because then God will say, "Well, my creation is lost," and that's when the battle will begin between good versus evil. And I think that where I look at where we are now, with things going on in the world, as bad as we look at it through our lens, there have been other moments in humanity through historical context that we could say have been a lot worse. but if we don't rein things in now, then it will get worse than it's ever been. Especially that if World War III does happen, we are at a different, and not to get political or out of the lens, but it all mixes well together into that question, is that we're in a different lens of our capabilities of weaponry and how we could destroy each other. And there's nothing more than what Satan wants and the demons want for more than humans to kill each other, you
Yeah.
know, and commit evil deeds and heinous, atrocious acts. And in that point, they would win. And I think that great battle would happen that is spoken about in Revelations and uh, through prophets as well, and through their prophecies. Um, because I really do believe in mystics. I think I do know somebody that speaks to angels, and God has spoken to her a few times, and you know, she has sent me messages saying, I got this message. I don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow or next week or a year from now or a couple of years from now, but there's going to be the situation you come across, and she's never been wrong. It might not come as fast as they thought it would be. Sometimes it takes times, but it hits all the bullet points of what she would say. And I say, well, okay, that makes sense. So I do believe in mystics, and I do believe in their prophecies, or these prophets that do talk about the end times and certain other things. But like I said, I'm not very well versed in that avenue. I should be more, but that's more a Father Bob thing. We all have our weaknesses and strengths in anything we do.
Katie asks, "Do you believe in familiar spirits and unfamiliar spirits?"
Familiar spirits and unfamiliar spirits. Well, when I think of familiar spirits, I think of like a Wicca thing, like Salem from Sabrina the Teenage Witch. Um, but yeah, I guess in a way, familiar spirits or unfamiliar spirits could be quite a possibility. Maybe something familiar to us, or something that uh, prophets walk in the spirit, not the flesh, nor the soul. Yeah, that's a good one. But yeah, no, it's quite possible. You know, I, I I think in a way it's quite possible. See, I don't believe in past lives at all, and I think that science actually has disproven that as of recently with um, genetic memory, and how memory can be passed down through parents, through grandparents, through family members throughout the centuries, and certain traumatic moments or gratifying moments or dark moments in our lives can be passed down to our loved ones, and that regression, so to say, can happen. If I had somebody that was abusing alcohol 3 lines down from me, my mother, my grandfather, and their father or mother didn't abuse alcohol, but the person before abused alcohol, that could skip. And then you can be an alcoholic, and that's genetic. We understand a lot about genetic memory now. There's also epigenetics, which is quite fascinating. So I think there's a lot more within science that can really talk about um, how we have these post past life regressions. But I think familiar spirits also falls in line with that, because I feel like sometimes a spirit will be familiar to us, and we might inkling it to, that was a spirit from my past life. It was a loved one of my past life, or this person was. So it's an interesting conversation. It's an interesting theory. Um, do I feel like animals might be familiar to us, or see, I don't know. Maybe they're more comfortable to us. Maybe some spirits are more comfortable to us based upon levels of trauma. I feel like people that have um, abilities, or not even no abilities at all, um, but I think that if we are I just lost my train of thought there for a second because I seen somebody post epigenetics, but no, I think that if in a way, familiar spirits can be quite possible, but in what way? But like oh, I remember where I was going with it, but I like I said, if back to what I was saying about demons and trauma, I think also spirits that have specific levels of trauma, like let's say I was abused as a child, let's say the spirit was abused as a child and died through that abuse, by that abuse, they are familiar to this person's trauma and feel certainty to talk to them about it. So I think it's quite interesting um, that the way you look at it. Yeah, when I hear familiar spirits, I think of like Wiccans and how they talk about you know uh, their spirit animals and stuff like that, or
Mm.
spirit guides. That's how I think of it. But I think it could be a mixed word in how it's interpreted. I've read a little bit about how it intertwines, and we got to look at the etymology of specific words, where each word can have multiple meanings. You can go on the Webster Dictionary right now, and they have a sub layer of how you can define it. But it's quite fascinating. It's definitely, like I said, it's definitely not fully my bandwagon, but with anything the paranormal, I've tried to dig my nose into it. I have a specific speciality, but I'm always up to learning more and seeing if I vibe with it.
Katie says it's a very interesting topic.
I bet it is.
April Mueller, that was the comment that you saw.
Yeah, no, it's true. And epigenetics can have things to do with the paranormal as well. Or why we deal with certain things with mental health. But yeah, no, epigenetics is quite a fascinating thing. So is in genetic memory. But if you haven't learned about it, please do so. Especially if you're a past life regressionist. Like I said, it's not my thing. I don't necessarily believe in it. That's more of a Eastern culture belief system. Like I love Hinduism. Like I love Japanese culture. And when I say I love it, I don't study it. I'm not a practitioner, but I've studied it, and a lot of that, especially in familiar spirits, comes from as well from that avenue, from that kind of mythos and folklore and belief system. But I think at the end of the day, you know, um, we interpret, especially early in cultures, especially early in our time. We know humans are over close to 250,000 years old, and we have 10,000 years of uh, kind of antiquated knowledge of what they thought and how they lived, more so than before that. But I think that in early days, their interpretations. Um, were more far fetched because they didn't know how to analyze it in a specific thought pattern. So for them, it was something that was celestial or beyond earthly understanding, and it was from the great vast unknown above them. And so I think it's quite fascinating how we can look at it through a modern lens and see, okay, why I can understand why they they thought it was this, or why they thought a bird or something was akin to them, and it was a lost loved one, and it was around them. But we also have that as well too in Christian, as well. Sometimes we'll hear people say, "Well, my grandfather loved blue jays, and I see a blue jay every time I think of him." And now that you have to look at it is that the luck of the draw. Sometimes when we lose something or someone, that we then jump to, well, maybe there was blue jays around all the time, and we just never consciously thought of it because, well, at that point it didn't have any meaning, more so than now my grandfather passed away, and I see Blue Jays all the time. And to be blunt, that's to be the fact more than anything else. We just don't analyze it unless it's meaningful to us, because the human mind's a very powerful thing. We've been very blessed to be given the brain that we have.
Right.
Um, so but it also processes so fast, and so things can be happening around us, and we're not processing it. But it becomes a part of our memory. But it's not just the frontal memory that we actually remember, like on this on this podcast right now. I'm going to remember this, but
Mm.
the things that are right of me that I might hear, maybe I hear a gunshot, and then but I might not remember I heard the gunshot, or to the left of me, my kid screaming, but I'm processing it. But then it's going to become a back memory to realize, oh, I was on this podcast, that great podcast, but my kid was screaming and there's a reason for it, and I don't remember the reason for it because I wasn't focused or fixated on that. But
Right.
we're interesting creatures, and I think it's interesting in how we interpret the spiritual realm, and through what people have experienced throughout the many centuries that we've walked this earth. But a lot of the modern lens is also quite fascinating, and how we can interpret what a lot of people's experiences are, what a lot of people's thought patterns are on it to this day. Ooh, that's a good question. I can guess, but do you think dissociative identity disorder has any spiritual or demonic influence due to trauma? Well, see, I don't think DID um, has. Yeah, before I get to that question, I actually find I find fascinating, even though it's entertainment. But when we look at pop culture, it's a great example for people to understand sometimes how I articulate my words. A movie made by M Night Shyamalan called Split, fascinating movie. Um, out Outside that, he kind of linked it to Unbreakable and then Glass. It became like part of that trilogy, which I think is kind of absurd in a way, but it could have been left off as a one and done. But he had multiple personality disorder, DID, dissociative identity disorder, how we say it nowadays in the DSM-5. But one of his personalities was able to go beyond the normal, like to a supernatural kind of state where he was able to jump long distance, could do crazy things, right? So you can say that there is quite a possibility that, and this is where projection comes into play, that if somebody with did DID um, has this personality where they fixate on something so much, we know the human mind and the human body can do quite miraculous things at times through adrenaline, and through distortion, and through all these things. Look at what the demonic can do to the human body at the possession, like a circumstance where it can contort the body, it can turn the head enough where it won't break it from the socket of your spinal cord, and eyes going black or other colors, your cheek structure changing, um, limbs uh, twisting beyond what is capable, as we would think, in walking every day. So I think that in a way that somebody with dissociative identity disorder could could and I say could in like a long dart in the dark, but possibly, maybe I should say, possibly could um, get to that level where they um, give off supernatural like um, qualities. As far as trauma with dissociative identity disorder, I think that mental health and maybe I'm not answering your question to the way that you would want it to be answered, but I also think that mental health is a gateway to the demonic or other spirits as well. So I think that if you have dissociative identity disorder, and of course, that would at some point be genetic or through copious amounts of trauma, where you impact personalities into your life, and then that becomes, you have 15 different U's or 10 different U's or 3 different U's. But I think that as well could open the gateway for a demonic personality to come in and utilize that as a scapegoat, right? Because one thing I like to tell people is a demon is um, a creature of the shadows. I like to say a ninja. They strike from the shadows, but in reality, it's true. They strike when you least expect it. They are very meticulous in how they deconstruct you, and they also are very manipulative. So, if somebody that has dissociative identity disorder that has gotten to that point due to copious amounts of trauma, it is quite possible that a demonic entity could come in, integrate into that in those personalities, and utilize that as kind of a facade to throw people off, saying, "Well, he'd been diagnosed with the dissociative identity disorder, so that personality that's coming out, that's that." But I think where that gets thrown out, if you look at it through the lens as a demonologist would, well, and then okay, maybe you go back to what I was saying about, can somebody that projects enough in that state have things happen, like can objects move if they're in that state? So, but one thing that I would say, and this is how an exorcist or even a demonologist would utilize to understand if somebody was possessed, was certain tactics of prayers, holy water. So, like, I don't think somebody with the dissociative identity disorder that projects and having these psychokinetic things happening in the plane with objects moving. Like, so let's say I have a team with me, and um, I say to one of my associates working with me, I say, go say the Hail Mary or say the Rosary in the other room at 3 o'clock, and just walk away. You just don't even say, "Oh," you just be like, "I'll be right back," and so you don't make it kind of like obvious that they're going to go do something. Say, I'll be right back." They go in the room. 3 o'clock strikes. They start saying the Rosary, the Hail Mary, or the Philippians, or some other psalm, and at 3 o'clock, that client then starts to have a reaction to that, and it starts saying, stop the prayers," or says something to the state that they know that the person in the other room at 3 o'clock is saying the prayers.
Right.
I don't think dissociative identity disorder is, and somebody that projects is able to kind of determine that. Now, if I had a medal in my shoe, it's a Saint Benedict's, or even let's just say something that's not obvious towards the normal individual, because most people know Saint Benedict's, Saint Michael's. What happens if it's a Saint Anthony medal? What happens if it's a Saint Joseph's medal? What happens if it's another Saint medal and it's in my shoe? But it also helps protect us. Um, and they say, get that metal out of your shoe. Once again, somebody those dissociative identity disorder that can project in a psychokinetic form, they're not going to know there's a metal in your shoe. So these are things that you can use to understand where the outliers are, because I do believe people that have mental health, there are a lot of people that are in an institution right now, that are in there, and they don't just have mental health, they're dealing with a spiritual affliction. But a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists don't want to hear that, so they pepper them with medication. And if you're on enough medication where you're a laxy daisy or you're knocked out most of the time, this entity is not going to be able to physically use them if the body is not able to physically move. So it's a mixed bag. It's a very interesting thought. um, mental health and the paranormal, or dissociative identity disorder, paranormal. Same thing with schizophrenia. Um, that's a dangerous one, but it's even quite possible through um, somebody that has schizophrenia that that in fact, beside the visions that are being created through their chemical imbalance or circumstances, that there is an actual true being as well speaking to them and having them do things, or persuading them to do things. So these are things that are fascinating because everybody thinks, well, they have mental health, there's nothing else going on. That's not the fact. And that's why I said that you have to really be understanding. And I will take on, as much as I get a lot of cases that are red flags, I always give the benefit of the doubt because I can't judge a book by its cover. And even though they give all the qualifications off of being crazy, you know, but sometimes crazy attracts crazy, right? So if
Yep.
they're crazy, that sometimes is enough of an anchor for something to come through and utilize that, because once again, it's a facade. It's a nice tactic to say, well, yeah, this person's crazy. They don't have no demon in them. They can't be helped because they need medicine. But maybe they do really need an exorcism or a deliverance, you know?
Like Brian said, mental health versus possessed.
And that's what we talk about with Father Bob and I, right? Faith and reason, right? Even though I have a faith, he's the priest. He 31 years of being a Catholic priest.
Yep.
He had formation, seminary, like he is so theologically sound. Like we have debates all the time and we go at it. We meet every Wednesday. We go to church together every Sunday. Like tomorrow we go to church, we go to mass together, and then we have a bite to eat and we talk. So like we always have theological debate. I don't agree with everything he says, but you know what? I also have to respect what he says because he's had that 31 years of being a priest. He's had that formation. He has his master's degree in theology or divinity. And so it's like I have to respect that. But I'm the reason, right? I mix my faith, but I also mix the other levels of construction, the social science of psychology, and of course other parapsychology and other methods, and we integrate those two together. Even though we have different viewpoints in certain circumstances, they also kind of mold together in a great form of fashion to understand. Okay, well, this is his viewpoint, this is my viewpoint, but in the same way they coincide and they work together and they can be utilized together in the things we do in our ministry work.
Hmm. And like KHSCR8 said, you never go into a situation looking for anything. You go in open and observe and feel.
Yes, that is a huge issue, right? So I always say is you need to go in with a plan. You need to have multiple plans because if plan A doesn't work, you go to plan B. If your plan B doesn't work, you go to plan C. You have to have a plan when you go in. You have to understand we have to do this. If something that happens, you have to go to this route. You have to have that kind of mechanism because if you're not planned enough, then things can fall apart and things can get dangerous real fast. But when you go in there with too much uh, assertion that there is something there, then you don't become objective anymore. You're subjective. You become part of that person's reality. You become a part of believing in their story too much. And it's great to believe in their story and help them out. But when you become so intertwined with it and become emotionally involved in it, then you're doing them injustice because you're not giving them an open-minded perspective of it, and you're not observing and listening and seeing what can happen. And that's a great statement because that's what I tell people. I never go in there wanting something. If something happens and I have an experience, great. It goes on the notch of my belt of having an experience. And then I can utilize that to teach people, lecture, speak about it, and also better understand my enemy or the spirit realm better than I did before. But never go in there and expecting something. Go in there to observe, go in there to help. And help, when I say help, could be multifaceted. It could be that You help them by making them understand there's nothing here, or there's something here, we can do this, or likely it's mental health, and I'm not a clinical psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist, so I can't say you need to go on medication, but I can say, well, I feel like that because of where you are, your trauma, and why this could be happening to you. You should seek therapy to talk about your past trauma, your depression,
Mm.
and I feel like that will help you. I sugarcoat it enough for them to understand that I'm not calling them crazy, but you can help people in many different ways. But that all comes from observation and feeling the circumstance, as well, of course, as collecting the data to then compile all that and make a necessary um, um, conclusion.
And yeah, I mean, even with your interviews with your clients, you can by talking to them, just sitting there talking to them, you can tell if there's a line of mental health. Like us, before we go in, we do background checks on our clients. We're checking medications, what they're
Yep.
on, because a lot of medications causes paranoia and delusions. And
Yep. Yeah, it's important to do an interview. Like I do a 3-point interview most of the time. I do a email questionnaire, I do a phone call, and then I do a physical interview with them. And the reason I do that is to see if their story changes. Adding details is great because not all the time in the hour conversation you can be like, "Oh, okay, well." But I also have a lot of my clients, if there's a lot going on, to write in a journal time and dates,
Mhm.
when this happened, and then I can utilize that as, okay, well, this falls in line with their story. So adding details to a certain amount is never a disqualifier to say that they're not dealing with something. But when they completely change the story from the email questionnaire to the phone interview to the physical interview, then there's worries for concern. But yeah, interview is an important thing, like, and I tell people, and I've never had um like law enforcement training of interrogation or interviews with criminals, but I have done a lot of interviews in my life as a manager in my line of work, and before that I was retail management, and I've done a lot of interviews in my time, and I usually, like I said, have a pretty good judge of character. So through their interview, you can tell, well, are they just being baloney? They're just telling you what they want for you to hear, or are they being sincere in their words and they're telling you realities, but they're also telling you that their downfalls and that and all this stuff. So I integrate a lot of the times of dealing with people in all different facets of life and integrate it into this line of work because it helps to just have a great active listening skill, and also have a high emotional intelligence as well on how you deal with them on an emotional level, and how you converse with them from what they're telling you. And it's great to, and as far as asking questions, right? You can, so if they're saying they're this, you can also throw out open-ended questions so that you're not adding to their narrative, but you're giving them the ability in those questions to give their narrative, but you're not aiding their narrative. So there's a lot of things you can do in the interview process that will help you be able to have a better understanding
right,
when you physically go there, or when you're getting involved, and if you want to get involved, because sometimes, like I always say, you can get involved with somebody and they could completely waste your time. I had a client that I got pretty far involved with, and not we were about to get physically involved, but I said something to him, and because maybe I was getting a little aggravated because he wasn't listening, and I get aggravated sometimes, and sometimes I should uh, catch my tongue, but I basically said something, and he's like, "Well, I know it's a demon, and what you're saying is wrong." And I said to him, I was like, if I remember correctly, you called me in because of my specialty, and you're telling me that I'm wrong, and you know that you're right. how about you just listen and I didn't say listen and shut up, but in my head I'm saying, how about you just listen and shut up for a
Right.
second? You called me in to assess your situation, and I don't think what you're saying is what you're dealing with. And that was more so in a sense of kind of levity of, hey, chillax. I don't believe you're dealing with a demon, but you could be dealing with something, and we will figure out what you could be dealing with. And I always say, I could be wrong, but that's why we physically get involved to
Mm.
add other element to it, because I have been proven wrong a couple times in my time of doing this. And, then I realize, okay, how was I wrong? And I realize, okay, maybe I shouldn't jump to a conclusion. But, you're going to get those kind of people, but the interview process is key important. Um and if it's not a long questionnaire of asking about medications, if it's not asking about their life before this haunting, and then you're especially in negative hauntings, you're not kind of diagnosing the situation correctly.
Right. And even like you've got that electrical background, I've got a construction electrical background, which that actually is beneficial in this field because we can go into a house and walk around and figure out like the EMFs with the electrical. You can find an electrical panel that's not hooked up right and it's throwing off a big EMF field or
Mm. It's true. Like, just to correct you, I come from mechanical background, so I'm by trade I'm a sheet metal mechanic, so HVAC guy, and I have a big plumbing background too, but I do electrical project management and estimating as well. But so I have a little bit of background in that, but the good thing about being in the construction industry in New England is that we have a lot of old houses. I just posted on Facebook not too long ago. I was at the White Horse Tavern, which is famously known as the oldest restaurant in America, still active and still open and still running. But I was also at the old Newport police station, now an inn, and I was looking at both locations. And digging deep into a lot of these places, you get to see why people could interpret this as a
Mhm.
spirit. Floors are unlevel, infiltration of air is out the wazoo, because even though they've done renovations, some of these renovations are from the 80s or 70s or even early 90s, and maybe not into the 2000 era. But so you have doors opening because air can hit it. Uneasy unlevel floors can actually create a vertical effect and make you feel uneasy and dizzy. There also might be asbestos, there might be other elements of specific things that can add to the element of people believing that there's a spirit there. And this isn't a lot of the old places that I've ever been to. A lot of the famous haunted locations people flourish to, I've been to a lot of them as well, but this is the same occurrence. This has a lot of the same stuff that I see in my construction background, and they're not informed enough. And I'm not blaming them, because people look at a lot of this as an entertainment level, watch television shows, and they don't tell you these things all the time. But like, I'll use levels in some of my cases. If I know it's an old house, I'll bring a level. I'll look at their water heater, see if their venting's correct. I'll look at their electrical panel, do they still have fuses? Is it faulty wiring? I'll look at their GFIs and do an EMF reading, just to see what the milligauss reading is. um, so these are all important things, because that can add a level of to why people are experiencing. But also, in my theory, if there is actually something going on there, it can also enhance that haunting as well, because not only are they having the natural occurrences that are making them feel uneasy, but if there's actually something there, it melts together and heightens that whole
Yep,
experience. And
exactly.
that's a dangerous thing too.
And we even found like these old houses, a lot of these old houses have that knob and tube wiring and they're spliced in walls and stuff. And them splices, they give off a high EMF field.
It is pretty crazy stuff. Yes. No, it's There's a lot in your house that can explain a lot of what you believe it to be paranormal or enhance to what could be occurring. Like if something does move, like if my Mike's Hard Lemonade is right here right now and it moves over here, right? Yeah, it's not that's not air. That's not electric current. There's something moving that, but that can't be thrown out the window. But now if my you can't see the edge of my desk, but at the edge of my desk, my bottle's there, and I have bad insulation or bad siding, and it's windy out, and it is enough air, and you wouldn't think it because you might not feel it, surprisingly, but that bottle might fall over, and then okay, well, was that paranormal? And a lot of people will jump that to that was paranormal because it's actually a thing that you learn early in psychology school is we all hear of it as fight or flight. It's a mechanism in our body that occurs. But one of the analogies they say is there's a bush outside, and in that bush there could be an animal because it ruffles, or it could be the unseen wind that is moving the brush. And a lot of people tend to jump that it's not the wind. There's an animal in there and it could be ready to pounce on me, or there's something in that bush that is in there. And that is something that us humans interpret because that's just how we interpret things because we always jump to the worst case scenario than to what could be easily explainable.
Yep, and that is true about old foundations. A lot of them do have the quartz in them, and
Yep. Yes, it causes high EMF due to moisture, but it also gives its own radiation off too. It also radiates, but also too, what's interesting about old foundations too is the stone tape theory, where all certain things can contain in the sense of moisture EMF, but it also can contain that emotion and that activity, and that's where a lot of people explain residual hauntings because something magnetizes that and contains it, and that story is a loop that happens every single day or every other day or every so often because that was an important moment that occurred in that house and it contained in that, and because of that emotion, and that emotion drove into the land or the property. So stone tape theory is a fascinating thing as well, and can also, in a way, lead to the paranormal. And it wouldn't be intelligent, but it still could be scary if something's happening, and you see a mist or a figure or something moving or a door opening. You know, that's going to be scary as well.
yep, that's like our Mormon massacre site out here in Missouri, Hans Mill. If you can go some nights during the summer and you won't hear nothing, nothing be going on. You go there the anniversary of the massacre, and it's like that residual energy is just playing over, like they were reliving that massacre when the militia rode in there and were shooting them all,
Yeah,
and it kicks up activity.
yeah, yep. It's a fascinating thing.
So yeah, and even extreme temperatures, like he was saying before too, will make old houses talk. When that
Yeah,
weather changes,
a wrapping of the wood, wood expands with certain temperatures. Lots of things, as well too. Especially for modern ghost hunters with their equipment, their lights. A lot of them are laughable, unfortunately, to me, because of my construction background and also having a tech background. So like people with static electricity meters, right? REM pods, they
mhm,
detect static electricity. But what I tell people as an HVAC guy, and I know this, is that if my room is 68 degrees, and most of us walk around 97 to 99 degrees, that's our bodily temperature, right? If I walk into a room that is 68 degrees, I'm creating static electricity in that room because there's two temperatures meeting, and causing a reaction in the room. So you also have to understand that as well. But what also that can do too, and that's why I think people talk about cold temperatures, like if it's hot out and there's a cold temperature, but that's also a good reason to look at, okay, well, if it's cold temperature, what is that a spirit, which it could be, and that's creating that static electricity. But we also have to take ourselves out of we have to put ourselves in that as well and say, well, okay, well, I'm part of what could be making this occur. And also, if spirits do feed off of static electricity or some sort of form of EMF or whatever, us integrating into a space can create that spark for something to occur as well, because we're creating that static electricity. We're creating that temperature challenge, I like to call it, and that could be something for allow it to come to fruition as well. So it's all fascinating stuff, but it's how you look at it and how you interpret it and how you get from there. That's why I always tell people, like, I don't always jump on the whim of something being haunted off of base one collection of data. Like, I have to get the trifecta for me to be really certain. The trifecta is I have to get a audio, I have to get something on video, and I have to have a personal experience within the confines of that. Or if I get an EMF hit or something else, and I get something on audio and then something on video, then you can't dispute that. You have this to prove it. Something moved on the camera. I
Mhm.
got an EVP at that exact same time, and I got a K2 hit or had a personal experience where I felt uneasy. And to me, that is enough of a conclusion to say, okay, well, there is something here. Now let's go from there.
Yep. And like the old school I was a custodian at, none of the grounds even for the electricals hooked up, so that place just gives off massive amount of static electricity. It's so bad that their security cameras will sit there and pulsate and flicker from
Yeah.
the static in that building, and
Yep.
a lot
Yeah.
of people don't realize that will kick up paranormal too because they can draw off that static.
Yeah. Yeah. To be honest, and I don't do it all the time, so shame on me. But what I tell I if you want a perfect investigation, right? A perfect investigation, and you want to really prove something is there. For one, bring a generator, run cords inside so you have minimalistic electricity flowing.
Mhm.
Shut off the electrical panel, so a gas generator, and leave the premise. Observe from a distance. Put devices in there. The electric's off. The only thing that you have to contend with is infiltration of air and other things, but there's certain experiments you can do, and then you can put, you have to be careful if you put walkie talkies or some two-way communication in there, because of course that will give off things, especially EMF meters or even static electricity, as you talked about. But step away and experiment that way. And if you get things on video and audio outside of being outside the house with the electricity off, then that's interesting to me. But now if you turn the electricity off, once again, what do they feed off of? But what's important also to me as well is when you look at the etymology of the word um, haunting, the root of it is haunted, right? Most
Yep.
hauntings don't occur unless somebody is haunted within the premise, right? So yeah, usually it's a catalyst of a person sparking that. To me, I think a lot of the times, unless somebody is integrated in that, these lay dormant because there's no way for them to communicate, because there's nothing giving them that ability to communicate. But it's all interesting things, and but there's quite a few things you can do to lessen the outside interferences of an investigation. But you also have to remember radio waves penetrate buildings, and so you have to be very careful of your outer surroundings too. And that's why even my questionnaire I ask is there a radio tower nearby? Is there an airport nearby? Is there running water nearby?
Mhm.
Um, so but there's a lot. So there's a lot of things you have to look at, and there's a lot of explanations to a lot of what people experience. But you know, we don't want that to be that. We want it to be ghosts and spirits.
Uh, as Shauna said, James, ever get lightheaded and or dizzy when hearing the movement behind you? Like you say that uneasy feeling, but you have it come and go.
Yeah, so actually, oddly enough, right? So, in I think in my ability of discernment, and once again, I'm not stating it's a clear ability or this or that, but and Father Bob has seen this, and Father Bob has had the same reactions in some specifics of our cases. I get a feeling in the back of the neck, if I believe if something's there, usually, right? But once again, I have to also understand: is it electricity? Is it high EMF? So I have to be precautionary of what conclusion I'm jumping to. But in a lot of circumstances where there has been something that has been solid and proven to be there through our own data collection or through a religious provocation or prayers. I do usually tend to get that feeling in the back of the neck. Not necessarily dizzy, but there is that reaction. Like I said, we in a lot of our circumstances within this, our body kicks into fight or flight, and a lot of us are stupid enough to fight it and stay there. But so that will come on you if something is there that you're not necessarily your body's comfortable with, or is there, once again, they need something to manifest per theory. So they're probably using some of your energy as well to try to attempt to manifest. So and then you feel uneasy, or for some people, if they get really drained because they're not protected and they don't have a good foundation of faith, they become dizzy because they are drained immensely for this thing to come and communicate to them. But yeah, no, that's actually a good tool that I use to help detect or lean towards that possibly something could be there. But once again, it could also be natural explanations as well, radon and CO2 and high EMF that could as well give you that tingling sensation and a specific feeling. But like I said, I get that. I tend to hunker down a little bit more and get a little bit more involved because I don't always get that. Uh, I get it time to time in really dark cases or even negative cases. I'll get that feeling, and I think that's my body telling me that there's not something good here, and just
Yeah.
be, be, be very careful of how you move forward.
But yeah, I know like me, it's for me, like it'll get me right feels like it's right between the eyes right here.
Mm,
I'm
makes
dealing with
sense.
dark.
It makes sense. The interesting thing about the human mind in itself is, I think, as much as, like I said, I have my love hate relationship with people of clear abilities and mediumship abilities, because I do feel a lot of them are theatrical, but
Mhm.
I also do tend to think everybody has abilities, right? I think that we all have our level of ability, because once again, scientific research, the pineal gland, once a thought dead gland, um, and a lot of Hindus and a lot of Eastern cultures actually tend to believe that was your third eye. And now we know the gland actually releases melatonin, which is, of course, we know what melatonin is. It comforts us and allows us to go in a rest-like state, helps us meditate, pray. But also, one thing it does too is it's like an active antenna. It actually transmits electric signals out. So to me, it's interesting that if we all had that gland, then we all would have that necessary ability to be an antenna, and as well to in a rest like state to be more aware of our surroundings, because we have a lot less on our minds. So something that is able to want to talk to us can be able to talk to us. But I think more people are more active and proactive in how their gland works, and that's why some people have stronger abilities than others. But I think we all do. We're all built the same. We're all built the same in reality, but some of us have deficiencies to specific things. Some people are born blind. Some people are born without taste. Some people are born without smell. Some people are born without hearing. Some people are born without limbs. So there are deficiencies that do happen through our creation. Um, but in an average, most of us have the same level of ability of senses, right? Everybody calls it the sixth sense, but we know there's like, I think there's like 13 senses actually identified in our inkling of life. So but it's fascinating. So it's interesting that you get it right there, but most people will get it within the confines of here, 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 and that's fascinating to me. Some people, you do tend to hear some people getting the hair standing up, the goosebumps, so to say, and some people get that reactionaries. But a lot of people that have do this line of work, right, tend to say that it's right around here,
Yeah.
than anywhere else.
And that's even my dad. He'll get the pressure on his chest like weight when we deal with something dark.
Yeah, that's actually a good thing too. Is like what I tell people is not so in any demonic case that I've ever been a part of, and very far and few between because it is rare. And you know, one of the infestation cases I dealt with, and it was a sign to me that says, okay, it's something's here not to be played with. Is I felt like I was being punched in the solar plex over and over and over again. And I don't know about you, Russell, but I regardless if you have abilities or not, and I've had people with me that don't believe in that necessarily, but when you walk into that house that has that infestation, it's like drudging through mud, right? It's
Yep.
like there's a different barometric pressure in that house, and that you feel like you're like drudging through quicksand or mud. It's heavy in there. It takes your breath away, and then your body starts to react. I don't know if that's happened to you, but
Yeah,
that's
it does.
that's that's been a thing that I've noticed in true demonic cases. If I get that feeling, then I'm like, oh, okay, now I have to be careful. And then I get the tingling sensation in the back of the neck, towards the bottom of my skull, and um, eh, but yeah, it's cool to hear that you have the same experiences because a lot of people that I've talked to as well, fellow demonologists or people in deliverance ministry that deal with this, they say the exact same thing. They feel like it's drudging through mud. They feel that in the solar plexus region like they're getting punched over and over again, and if anybody's ever been punched in the solar plex, I have because I did martial arts for a long time in my life. It's not quite a fun experience.
No.
So it takes your breath away, you know?
Yep. And also, like me, if I'm around like a regular spirit, and if I walk into a room and there's a regular spirit, I'll get the tingling in my. It'll go down my arms into my hands and stuff like that.
Yeah. I've heard people say that.
And I've noticed the more you do it, the more you get seasoned, the more your abilities get enhanced to it.
Of course, yeah. I think that's applicable, right? It's like if you do the same thing over and over again at work, right? You tend to hopefully get better at it. So yeah, I think that the more that you're involved in it, your body comes accustomed to it, and I think that's a good thing. Because if it didn't, then I don't know what you're doing wrong. But yeah, no, it's true. I definitely believe that your body becomes more enhanced to it, and you become better in understanding why your body's are reacting in the way that it is. But it seems to unravel a lot more, like the back of the neck thing that didn't always happen. Um, but it started happening later on in my life when I started getting more involved and more heavily involved, because there was a time in my life where I was having cases almost every week, every weekend, and now it's a little bit more quiet than it's ever been. But
Mhm.
but yeah, there was a period, and I think through those trials and tribulations, my body just became accustomed to it as well, and now it's a good sensory tool. Our bodies is a good sensory tool. It can deceive us, of course, in many different ways, but
Right.
it's a good thing to use. Yourself.
Right. And we got about 10 minutes left. If anybody's got any more questions, they want to throw them up in the chat for James. Feel free to post your questions up. But I know, like, I was talking to Archbishop Rita Stragla, who was on the Legion of Exorcists,
Yeah.
and like she was saying, the ones that do this type of work that deal with the demonic, the devil's got our wanted poster in hell. So
Say that again.
she said that the devil's got our wanted posters in hell, the ones that do the demonic work that get rid of it.
Yeah, well, I think that inkling of idea also stems from a famous saying by Ed Warren, right? That when you get in this line of work you're marked. So I truly believe in that because, for one, they're not stupid. They're millennia old, and they're non-corporeal. The demonic forces are super smart. You got to give them that respect, right? That they are very smart creatures. They can easily thwart us and manipulate us, but yes, it's true. Like I feel like I've done specific cases where it could have been the same spirit. To be honest with you, as it would challenge me the next time around. But it's quite interesting to say that because, in reality, if you look at it in human mechanism, it's true, right?
Yep.
Um, like look at our good old pals Russia. Things have never been great with them since the Cold War and the Mussolini and all that stuff. So
Yep.
it's like I mean Stalin, not Mussolini, Stalin. But so like a lot of that can be attributed that once you start getting involved in their plans and thwarting them, you become their enemy and you become targets or uh, enemies to them where they will attempt to affect you. Me and Father Bob most recently uh, just did a case, and uh, our the week before he went through a lot. I went through few things, and then after the case, things happened too. Like, my kid almost choked, and oddly enough, like he says, "Oh, see, Benedict, say," but I have a 2-year-old, and I have so many medals because I give medals out like candy. And so I don't know how this medal got to where it was at because in reality it shouldn't have because I keep my medals in my car. And so because I travel all the time and so I give medals out. So my kid somehow had a metal in his mouth and he could have swallowed that if I didn't hear the metal clinging in his mouth. So that was one of the things that was retaliatory because it was like if my kid swallowed that, yeah, Saint Benedict's medal is like this big, right? If he swallowed that, that could have been the end of my son. And luckily, I was very open to watching my son. For that split second, though, kids they'll put something in their mouth, and if you're not watching them, they could swallow it. But
Yep.
fortunately, that split second that you put it in his mouth, I'm like, "What is that sound?" And then I realized there's something in his mouth, and I said, "Give me it," and spit it out. And he spit it out. It's the Saint Benedict's medal, and there was no way in hell that metal was there where he grabbed it. There was no way in hell. So we also dealing with this work, we deal with a lot of retaliatories,
Yep.
and that's why we have to pray. We have to have a good relationship with God, and the saints and the archangels and the angels, because if not, talking about my kid, one of them. Give me a second, Bubba. We're almost done. But okay, I'll come up in there in a minute. Shut the door, please. I love you. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of retaliatories as well that can happen in our lives. And it's because they want to thwart us. Like the dark time I was talking about earlier, where then I had that another kind of epiphany in that intercession by God was that I think a lot of it was my like life decisions, right? I made a lot of poor choices in my life, throughout my life, and so I think some of those, of course, a lot of it was that, but I also think it was entanglement as well of the other side, adding more to it, and making me not think clearly.
Mm,
So because if you can take out a soldier of God, then there's less people that can thwart the devil. So I also feel like that you have to live a different kind of life. You have to you're going to make bad decisions. We're all human. We're all sinful.
yep.
None of us are perfect, but it's how you recover from that sinful nature that is important for our line of work. And I kept going down a dark path, and so but eventually, like I said, I had that intervention, or intercession, and then I realized, well, okay, something's going on here for this to happen, and I need to wake up and smell the roses, and I need to get back on the right path, get on the saddle, because I know I know what's happening here. And that's something that's dangerous in our lives, especially if we have family and stuff like that. We always have to be very we have to always be precautionary in how we deal with things, how we live our lives, how we pray, how we do all this stuff, and it's important. It's not an easy line of work, and that's what sickens me sometimes when I see all these demonologists and self-proclaimed exorcists out there, um, doing this work, and they have no clue what they're putting themselves in danger, their families in danger, and their clients in danger because, like once again, they believe they're doing good, but
Yep.
the belief that they're doing good is not enough for that actual good to actually translate to necessary and profitable conclusions for the people.
April asks, okay, hard question, but do you believe children can be possessed?
At a certain age, yes, I think that innocence protects us for a period of time. I think once you hit a specific level of adolescence, early teenager, where you can start making some cognitive decisions on yourself and bad decisions, then I think it's possible. As far as younger children, I think it's debatable. I've never seen a young kid, any younger than or known of, and truly there might be small, one or two accounts here or there that I'm not very familiar with, but anything anybody under 14 years old that has been affected by demonic possession that I'm well aware of, but I could be wrong. But that's an interesting conversation because Father Bob and I actually was presented that question on another interview of ours, and he said, um, he's not well informed enough to say of situations that have occurred to say that it's possible. We never seen it. I've never seen it. It's always been at a certain level of age where then it occurs. I think that innocence protects us. I think that our imagination, our gullibility can also as well be dangers at a young age. But I think that there's a certain point where a demonic is interested in you as well because you got to remember, um, when you're possessed, you're a vessel of hatred and destruction at that point. It's
Mm,
not only to be a mockery of God's creation, but it's also to do bad in the world as well, to kind of create a wave of chaos. And so children are already a wave of chaos. So, but I definitely think that innocence protects them. Like I said, there might be a couple cases out there that I'm not very familiar with where that would say that children can be possessed, but there are not many of them that I know of, if any at all, that will signify that that question.
And one last question, why do spirits live in dolls?
They don't live in dolls. Items aren't possessed. Um, they have attachments or they're binded to an item. But when you hear the term binded, it doesn't. it's not living in it. It's attached around the area of the doll. Why spirits maybe would attach to a doll, a benevolent spirit, so to say, let's say, is for one, maybe that little girl, that person, um, young or old, had a very huge attachment to that item. It was very important to them. It brought great comfort into them, and so they leave a little bit of themselves to that object, right? So that object now has a piece of their anchor to that. And so when the object is there, and if they're not fully crossed over, they didn't go to heaven, they're purgatorial, whatever, that is like an anchor for them to be around it. So, if you bring an item in there that somebody had high emotional attachment to, there could be activity from having that object there because that object has a piece of that person or that consciousness with that object, not in that object, but with that object. Now, same thing with the demonic spirits. Annabelle or Robert the Doll. There's plenty of known talk about haunted objects that have proclaimed demonic spirits around them or attached to it. But as well, once again, some of these spirits might have been binded through ritual to these items, and a lot of that actually has the root from old Hindu exorcisms. Hinduism is the oldest modern day religion. It's close to over 5,000 years old. But a lot of the monks, when they and still I believe to this day, when they performed the exorcism ritual or expulsion ritual, they used a Ferber dagger, and the Ferber dagger actually was an item where they would um, bind this spirit into the dagger, and then they would disperse the dagger into the earth or a bowl of rice, and then that would be where the spirit then would dwell, or they would be expelled or expunged into a specific realm. And that has the same essence of thought with items. You bind an item to that; it's attached to the item. So wherever the item goes, if you cascade it into a protective box, or you put it in a black bag and throw it in a body of water, or you bury it on hollowed grounds, then that would be contained there. And that was the necessity of the idea of binding spirits or demonic entities or things to objects, because it is easier to dispose of an object than to try to figure out where you're bringing that spirit or demonic entity. If you're pushing it outside the house, you're pushing it outside the house. If you're pushing it outside of a person, you're pushing it outside a person. But do they linger? Are they going to wait for that person to fail again? Or if there's a falter, if, situation in the household, like marital issues or drugs or something that is negative that happens in the house that kind of ruptures that barrier of protection around that house, then it can come back in again. So there's a way to, if you put an item and take the item off the property, then that it's not going to be within the confines of that land or that individual. So it's a very interesting thing. um um but yeah, no, that's why spirits might be attached to objects or dolls. So I it's interesting. And also sometimes too with demons, they'll attach to lovable items as well, because then of course there's the manipulation thing, or there's a facade. You bring this nice lovely looking doll in here, um and then bring the doll in, and then now there's activity happening because it was a tool of a facade for them to be able to intercede in somebody's life.
Damien asked if you're a doctrine priest.
What, me? No, so I work with the priest, Father Bob Bailey. I have a ministry background. I was formally ordained, but no, I am not a priest. I'm not an exorcist. I am a laity, and my study is in the realms of demonology. But no, I'm not a priest. What do I class a jinn? A jinn is an elemental. A jinn is not a demon. It is an elemental force. The Islamic version of the Islamic version of a demon, I believe, is, gosh, begins with the S, but there is a version of the Islamic. Growing a blank right now, but there is an Islamic version of a demon, because it is the Abrahamic religion. So it is of the three: Jewish, Christianity, and Islam. They are all Abrahamic religions and have very, very big similarities to them in their foundation and in their structure. But gosh, I can't think of it, but a jinn would be an elemental, and a jinn would more so come from the realms of Islamic folklore. They still do believe in them to this day, but that came from um, early um, foundations of Islam before it transitioned to the Abrahamic beliefs nowadays. But that's from early folklore, just like Jews believed in golems and um, stuff like that.
Awesome. Well, the time has come. We're gonna end the show now. I thank James and Nito joining me tonight. If people want to get a hold of you to book you for Paracons or need help with any of the demonic stuff or anything like that, how can I get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can add me on Facebook. There's only one James Anito that exists in this world beside my biological father, but doesn't have social media or any access to the internet that I know of. So James Anito on Facebook. You can also go to jamesanito.com, how it's spelled, but .com, no space. I tell a lot of people, if you don't know how to spell my name, I have my website also connects to demonology.org. That's very easy, demonology.org. And then if for Father Bob and I, if you want to reach out to us, we have a page on Facebook called Faith and Reason. Faith and then the and symbol, reason. And he also has a website called holyswordapostolate.com. And you can reach out to us through that as well. So there's many means of access, and if you want to get in contact with me, I do give my phone number out. Just be very respectful of it, because if you disrespect me, I'll disrespect you. 401-808-7416. If you're in need, please text me. Let me know if you have issues, and I will do my best to help you or get somebody to help you.
Awesome. I thank everybody for joining me tonight, and we will be back next Saturday night with another guest, and we will see you all next week.